So here we are, another Marvel Disney Plus show which has a promising start and a disappointing finish. Moon Knight. Now, Moon Knight is a new Marvel Disney Plus show which basically follows the story of Stephen Grant, played by Oscar Isaac in the show. Basically, discovers that he's got this alter ego known as Moon Knight, and with this alter ego comes an alternative personality known as Mark Spector. Then basically, throughout the rest of the show, you see Stephen Grant trying to deal with his alternative personality and his alter ego, but also trying to get away from Ethan Hawke's big bad villain, and at the same time though, dealing with this woman who's come up to him and basically said that she is his wife, but he remembers nothing about her. And that's basically what I got from the setup for Moon Knight. I mean, there's more to it than that, there's a lot more to the show than that, but that's essentially the setup for the show. And honestly, I've got to admit, I should love this show. I should absolutely adore it. But I just don't. And I really didn't get along with it. And it's a real big shame. Because, oh god, there's so much in the show which I just really should love. But I just don't in the end. And honestly, it came across as suffocating overall. And it came across as just unnecessarily complex. And just not in a good way. Honestly, I don't like talking shit about Marvel. I don't like shitting on all the Marvel stuff that comes out. I really don't. Because there are some Marvel stuff in the past which I really loved. There is, like the Guardians of the Galaxy films. But the thing is though, I really want to love Marvel, but I feel so much recently, whether I'm reviewing, Shang-Chi, Eternals, maybe not Spider-Man No Way Home, though I don't love that film anymore, but still, all these Marvel stuff that's coming out recently, and also the TV shows with, WandaVision, with Falcon Winter Soldier, with Hawkeye, and all these other Marvel things, I feel like I just keep shitting on Marvel all the time. I feel like I just keep saying bad things about them, but I don't want to. I want to watch everything Marvel and just absolutely adore it, but I seem to really not get along with their stuff recently, and Moon Knight is no different. One of my big problems with this show is that it feels like it's trying to do too much. So much is being thrown at the wall in this show, and some of it's sticking, some of it's really good, which I'll get onto a bit later in the review. But at the same time though, quite a lot of it isn't sticking, and quite a lot of it just comes across as boring, and I hate using that phrase, but it's the truth. Quite a lot of this show just comes across as like they don't really know how to handle everything. They're trying to do too much in the show, and by the end, I just kind of felt tired and exhausted, and like, I don't care what's going on anymore, because there's all this stuff in the show about the Egyptian gods, and that stuff really didn't work for me. Like, I understand the Egyptian gods might be something about the Moon Knight character, might be key to the Moon Knight character in the Marvel Comics. However, like I said before, I'm going to say again here, I've never read a comic book in my life. And also, I'm going to be honest, I hadn't even heard of Moon Knight before I saw the first trailer for this show. And then, I'm guessing a lot of people don't know who Moon Knight is as well. And I'm guessing the majority of people who watch these Marvel Disney Plus shows, who watch Marvel movies in general, probably haven't read the Marvel comics. Honestly, the Marvel movies are like the highest grossing films of all time, so I bet a quarter of the people who actually watch the Marvel films actually know the Marvel comics, and I bet that's a similar sort of statistic with the Marvel Disney Plus shows. And that's how I kind of feel, because like, I'm watching this show, and I understand that the Egyptian god stuff might be key to the Moon Knight characters in the comics, but the comics aren't the TV shows, the comics aren't the films. That's what Kevin Feige, the head of Marvel Studios, always says, the comics aren't the movie. And so that same sort of state of mind should be carried into the TV show, and when you're watching Moon Knight, it should be fresh, new and exciting, and just simple to follow. But as somebody like me, who hasn't read the Marvel comic books, who didn't know the Moon Knight character while watching the show, and who's not really into all the Egyptian god stuff in general, I don't even know much about Egyptian gods, I'm gonna be honest, I'm watching the show going, why are you doing all this Egyptian god stuff? Really, why? Just focus on the stuff that works. The stuff with the Stephen Grant and Mark Spector persona thing. That's really good. All the alternative personality stuff in the show works quite a lot for me because of Oscar Isaac. Honestly, Oscar Isaac is so good in the show. He's phenomenal in this show. And he made quite a lot of the Moon Knight stuff work. And by the way, side note here, for a show called Moon Knight, you don't really get to see much of Moon Knight in his costume. In fact, I think in the show as a whole, you only get to see about 5 minutes of Moon Knight, and I'm not exaggerating there, I'm really not. And by the way, yes, the show's 6 episodes, it's a 6-episode TV show, but each episode is like 45 minutes to an hour long. And, you know, you only really get 5 minutes of actually seeing the proper Moon Knight in its full costume in this show as a whole. Like, that stuff doesn't hugely bother me, but at the same time, though, it is a criticism, particularly when you call a show Moon Knight, and you don't actually get to see much of Moon Knight within itself. And I don't know, it was a bit iffy, that I've got to admit. But anyway, going back onto the things I really liked, you know, Oscar Isaac is great in the show because he brings to life that storyline with, you know, Stephen Grant and Mark Spector. When you find out what's really going on there, there's quite a few plot holes still, like in episode 5, which I'm not going to get into spoiler details just yet in this review. But yes, there's still some plot holes when you find out what's really going on with the Stephen Grant and Mark Spector thing. But it works for the most part, simply down to Oscar Isaac. And also that plotline is written well, it's got a lot of emotion there, which also works really well. And when you find out about the dark past of Stephen Grant, or should I say Mark Spector. If you haven't watched the show, you understand that, but if you haven't watched the show, you understand what's going on there. But yes, when you find out about the dark past that Stephen Grant, aka Mark Spector, has gone through, that is really interesting. But there's not enough of that, or it doesn't feel like there's enough of that, because you've got all this stuff to do with Egyptian gods going on, and I don't care about that stuff. I really don't. I want to watch the show and just have fun with it. Honestly, if the show focused more on the Stephen Grant and Mark Spector stuff, like episode 5 did, I quite like episode 5 because it focused more on that storyline. If it focused more on that storyline overall and took out all the Egyptian god stuff, I would love this show. That's the annoying thing. I mean, I don't know if I'd love it, but I'd like it a lot more at least anyway. But it just doesn't. You've got all this stuff with the Egyptian gods in like episode 3 and 4, and you want to go, why? Just why have you got all this stuff? Like, there's a character called Khonshu. Whenever Stephen Grant, aka Mark Spector, puts on the Moon Knight costume, there's this character called Khonshu, voiced by F. Murray Abraham, which shows up throughout the show. And F. Murray Abraham isn't doing a bad job voicing the character, but it just feels like quite a boring part of the whole Moon Knight character, I've got to admit. Because every time he shows up in the show, he's just got a really low voice that I just got bored by instantly, because it sounds weird. Like he's like, oh hello, I'm Khonshu, I'm here with Moon Knight, Khonshu. That's what it kind of sounds like throughout most of the show, and it doesn't really work. And I get that was a conscious decision, but at the same time though, I don't know, that didn't work for me either, because it relates to all that Egyptian god stuff going on in the show, which I just don't care about. I even know if it's Egyptian gods really, it might just be Egyptian mythology in general, but I don't really know, because I don't care about Egyptian gods, and therefore I don't care about all the Egyptian stuff going on in this show. And I get that's what they're trying to get to. I get that was all a conscious decision to add all this Egyptian mythology stuff in there. I understand that, but it just didn't work for me. And really annoyed me that it didn't. I don't know if you can tell, I'm actually quite annoyed that I don't like this show, because it had a promising start. It really did. I watched the first episode, I was like, wow, this is actually quite enjoyable, it's quite unique. There's no big blaring Marvel references, which you got in WandaVision, or The Falcon Winter Soldier, or Loki, or something like that, and Hawkeye. There was no big blaring MC references in the first episode of the show, and it was just fun and refreshing and exciting and something different. And then episode 2 wasn't as good in my opinion, but it was still good. Then episode 3, you know, wasn't as good, but it was still okay. Then episode 4, then episode 5, and then the last episode, wow. With the last episode, okay, if you like the last episode overall, that's great. I'm so jealous. Personally, I found the last episode hard to get through. I really did, because there's a lot of big CGI fights with these two big Egyptian gods, and if you've seen the last episode, you know what I mean. There's a lot of big CGI fights, and you know, sometimes that's worked for me in films before, because they're in films, like in Godzilla vs. Kong. I quite enjoy watching Godzilla and Kong battle it out, because I've got a soft spot for that sort of stuff. But that's Godzilla and Kong. When you're seeing it in this last episode, it's so boring. I hate using that phrase. I hate using the phrase boring, but it's true. Okay, it's done in such a tedious way. You know, it's so lackluster. There's no excitement there. And just the last episode felt inconsequential, anticlimactic. Like, they had to build up to the last episode, and I thought I was going to get this big revelation that, you know, everything was going to be in, like, Stephen Grant's head or something like that, which would have been really exciting. But then at the same time, though, when I got to episode 5, I'm thinking, I don't know that's going to happen anymore. And even so, we did get a reveal in episode 9. It wasn't that reveal that I was expecting, but I still like the reveal we got. But the thing is, though, in episode 6, just everything that was going on to do with the Mental Institute, to do with the, all the Egyptian god stuff, to do with, with Stephen Grant and Mark Spector, just kind of felt anticlimactic. It's how they rounded that off. And I'm actually going to say something I really didn't ever expect to say about a Marvel Disney Plus show. It should have been longer. WandaVision I felt was one idea exaggerated over 9 episodes. Falcon Winter Soldier I felt was the right length. Loki I felt was the right length. And Hawkeye I felt was the right length, but I don't really care about Hawkeye at all, to be honest. I completely forgot about that. And I only watched it at Christmas and actually remember more about Spider-Man No Way Home, which came out after Hawkeye, and that says a lot about that show overall. Because Hawkeye, really didn't work for me, but that's neither here or there. But anyway, back onto Moon Knight. This show should have been longer. It actually should have swapped the amount of episodes, with WandaVision. WandaVision should have been 6 episodes, and this should have been 9 episodes, to really get to the meat of the story, to really explain all the Egyptian gods, to get me interested in that stuff, because I was never really interested in it. Get me compelled into this whole story, and get me really gripped on what's going to happen, and I never felt that watching the show. In fact, quite a lot of it felt playful, like they weren't taking things too seriously, and I understand they're talking about life and death stuff in the show, like they talk about it, but it still just didn't feel like life and death stuff. It just kind of felt playful, like so much of the MCU does overall. But anyway, go back onto the episode stuff. This show just should have been longer. It should have been 9 episodes. Really get to the meat of this story. But it wasn't 9 episodes. It was 6 episodes, which means the last episode has this really anticlimactic wrapping up of all the storylines. Where you just kind of go, what? Why? Why did I care about that? Why did I care about that? Why did I care about any of that? And spoilers here if you haven't watched the show, but if you haven't yet, I watched the review, you're kind of asking for spoilers, got to admit, so, okay, spoilers here. In the post-credit scene of this series, I literally laughed. Honestly, the way they killed off Ethan Hawke's villain was laughable in my opinion. Like, he's a great villain in the show. He's not particularly well written in my opinion, but Ethan Hawke brings a lot to that character, and he's really compelling to watch just through Ethan Hawke's before. And then, in the final episode, they left him alive, and I was like, oh, that's great, you can bring him back in a future Marvel thing, whether it's a TV show, whether it's a film, or whatnot. But the thing is, though, in the post-credit scene, they killed him in the most anticlimactic way possible. I literally sat there, and when his death happened on screen, I laughed. And I didn't expect to laugh at this show, especially when I saw it in the first episode. I thought, wow, this is something different. But then I laughed at the end, and not in the way the show wanted me to. I laughed because it was actually quite bad. And I've done that in Marvel stuff in the past. I didn't expect to laugh at this Marvel show in particular. And, well, here we are again. And, just there's so much of this show which just feels like I should love it. There's quite a few episodes. I think it was like episode 5, I might be wrong though, episode 4. Like when you see Stephen Grant, aka Mark Spector, going into all these tunes with his wife, that should be really interesting. And that should really, really work for me because it kind of brought like Indiana Jones vibes and like the Mummy vibes from like the 1990s. But it didn't really. And that's all because I kind of felt suffocated when he got all this exposition going on about the Egyptian god stuff. And I don't care about that. I understand that might be a key part to the Moon Knight character in the comics, but this isn't the comics. This is a TV show. Take all that Egyptian god stuff out. Take it out and just focus on the Mark Spector, Moon Knight, and Stephen Grant stuff. That works really, really well. And all the stuff to do with the wife as well, that works great in the show as well. And she's great in the show. I don't know the actual actor who plays her, but the one who plays the wife is fantastic in the show. And also the Ethan Hawke stuff, that's good in the show for the most part. Focus on all that. And exclude all that Egyptian god stuff out. And you know what? You've got a good TV show. But that's not what this one is. That's not what this one is, and it genuinely annoys me because it had so much potential in its first episode. I watched the first episode and I really enjoyed it. But then I got to the last episode and I literally went, here we go again. I felt the same way I did at the end of the last episode of this show as I did when I watched the last episode of WandaVision, because I ultimately found WandaVision disappointing. And that's the thing, because the last episode was disappointing, I'm never going to go back to this show. I kind of say the same thing about Game of Thrones. The last season of Game of Thrones really disappointed me, and so for that reason, I'm never ever going to go back and rewatch the full 8 seasons of Game of Thrones. I might go back and watch a couple of episodes now and then, but I'm never going to watch the show as a whole again, and that's kind of the same way I feel about Moon Knight. I might watch the first 2 episodes again one day, but to be honest, I probably won't do that either, because I know how the show ends, and it doesn't have a good end. Oh, God. And that just ruins it for me when I'm trying to rewatch, because I'm sitting there thinking, in the first couple episodes, or like the first couple seasons or something like that, well, I know how the show ends, and that has quite a bad payoff. That's wrapped up in quite an anticlimactic way. Oh, and by the way, that also is really bad and doesn't actually make that much sense. And it's just, that's kind of how I feel like when I watch a show which I loved at the beginning, and then when I get to the end, it's bad, so I can't rewatch it ever again. That's how I feel like when I watch a show like this. And I really didn't want it. But anyway, the other point, I'm not really a fan of the show. But that's not to say it doesn't have some perks. Because I always like to talk about the good things to these shows and these Marvel movies, whether I like them or not. And actually, I do think the show is made well, considering it's got a TV budget. I think it's got a great musical score. Although, to be honest, I don't think the musical score will be carried on into any more projects with Moon Knight in. So, I don't know how relevant that's going to be. But it has a great musical score for the show within itself. Also, all the performances are great. Oscar Isaac's great. Ethan Hawke's great. And the one who plays, Stephen Grant, aka Mark Spector's wife, she's great in this show, and we like what they did with her character. I thought that was good, what they did with her character, actually. I didn't think it was great, I thought it was good, but it still worked to me in the show. And also, I think that the show had a promising start, and I like the fact that it doesn't really have much MCU references. In fact, on the top of my head, I can't really think of any MCU references, and I kind of like that. But at the same time, no, it still feels boring, because they've got all this Egyptian god stuff, and that's kind of suffocated me. And ultimately, it made the show to feel more complex than it needed to be. This could be a really interesting story, Stephen Grant dealing with his alternative personalities and dealing with his new alter ego. That's not what the show is. Although that's the central plot on the show, you have all this stuff with the Egyptian gods, which doesn't sound as big of a thing on the surface of the show, but actually when you watch it, it's key to the show, and just not in a good way. I feel like a broken record with all this Marvel stuff. I really do. I feel like a broken record. I feel like I keep watching Marvel Disney Plus shows and Marvel films and keep going, okay, that's bad, that didn't work, that's bad, that didn't work, that. But it's just kind of how I feel. And I can't lie. I can't lie on this channel, because what would be the point of me on this channel? What would be the point of me sitting here and going, you know what, I actually love Moon Knight. Why? It was fun. There's no point in me doing that. There's no point in me lying. I may as well tell the truth. That's the point of this channel. And for me personally, I didn't like Moon Knight. But if you loved it, that is fantastic. But personally, I just didn't. And I struggled with the show, particularly from episode 3 onwards. I just struggled with the show. And it had a promising start, but a disappointing finish. And it just, yeah. The ending really didn't get along with me whatsoever. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Moon Knight, I'm going to say that's a 5.5 out of 10. As for my rankings with the Marvel Disney Plus shows, I'd probably say that this is the second best, but that's not saying much. I mean, I like Loki just simply because it embraces itself, it embraces identity a bit more, embraces identity far more than the other Marvel Disney Plus shows do, in my opinion. So I like Loki the most out of all the Marvel Disney Plus shows I've seen. But at the same time, though, I'd probably say this is second. That's still not saying much. Hawkeye, I don't remember anything about, really. Other than the fact that Kingpin was there, I don't remember anything about Hawkeye. And then The Falcon and the Soldier, although I enjoyed watching that, it's quite forgettable now. Honestly, I can't remember a thing about that show. And then you go on to WandaVision as well, and ultimately WandaVision disappoints me, because it had such a good start and then such a disappointing end, which is also how I feel about this show. And also, in the last episode of this show, you had the big CGI fight, which again, all these Marvel Disney Plus shows. And sometimes that can be fun to a degree, but I really don't get along with big CGI fights unless it's Godzilla or Kong. I really don't get along with them. And, that was one of my big problems with Shang-Chi when I watched it. That ended with a big CGI fight. That was one of my big problems with Eternals. And sometimes it's okay. Sometimes the CGI fights can work to a degree, like the big CGI fight with Dr. Octopus and Spider-Man on the train in Spider-Man 2. That's fantastic, in my opinion. But, in this show, the big CGI fight between Khonshu and another big Egyptian god was just kind of like, I don't really care at all. And that's one of the big reasons as well why Loki is still my favourite Marvel Disney Plus show. Because even though I don't love Loki, I just kind of like it. But the thing is, with Loki, in the last episode of that show, the big set piece was with 3 characters having a conversation in a room together. And I thought that was brilliant. I was a big fan of set piece. But then, later on, I found out that I was basically a big fan of set piece because, Loki is going to be a multiple season show. It's going to be 2 seasons. And also, the show was sort of the height of the pandemic, so they couldn't do any big CGI fights because they didn't have the resources or the money at the time. So yes, they had a conversation with 3 people in the room because that was the only way they could. And I really liked that, but I bet there wasn't a conscious decision. I bet that was a decision forced upon them because of the pandemic. And now here, and with all the other Marvel Disney Plus shows, you got big CGI fights, which just don't work for me. And sometimes they're not all CGI fight. Hawkeye isn't a big CGI fight, but at the same time though, it's still quite anticlimactic, and it doesn't feel exciting. It's kind of like, why should I care about all this? Because in the end, it just feels like too much. It just feels suffocating, and it just feels like I should care about this more than I do. I should love this show more than I do. But I just don't. That's what it feels like. I really wanted to love this show. I really want to like it. But in the end, I just think it's fine. I don't think it's particularly bad, but I don't think it's particularly good either. Yeah, I'm bored going on about it. I don't know if you can tell, but yeah, it's really frustrating me, this show. It really did. And if you love it, that is fucking fantastic. But personally, I just didn't. And it was yet again a Marvel Disney Plus show which had a promising start and a disappointing finish. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Moon Knight, I'm going to say that's a 5.5 out of 10 from me. Anyway guys, what do you think of Moon Knight? Please do comment down below. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Anyway guys, thank you as always for watching, and if you haven't yet, please do click down below and subscribe on this video, and look forward to many more, both film and TVs, coming very soon on this channel. See you guys again soon, but bye for now. Bye!